Welcome to Glow&Tell, a podcast about all things beauty, wellness, and business, sponsored by Artemis, the brand empowering the unsung heroes of beauty and wellness. Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Glow&Tell. I am here today with Susanne Schmaling, who is the founder and CEO of the Esthetics Council. Susanne, it's so great to have you on. I'm really excited for today's podcast and to talk a little bit more about something that I feel is not talked about enough. I know it's something that's a big mission driver for you, which is estheticians' rights and responsibilities. So I want you to really take it away and introduce yourself, a bit about your background, and tell us more about Esthetics Council and what your mission is and what you're looking to achieve in the industry.
Great. Thanks so much, Delaney, for having me on. I appreciate this. I could talk for hours about this, it feels like. But I've been in the industry for about 30 years now. I started as a teenager working makeup. I was going to be a professional makeup artist, worked on some movies and TV shows and things like that. And through my process, I met some incredible mentors that were really focused on helping people with healthy skin. At the time, we called it paramedical makeup, which is not a term that you hear much anymore, and then paramedical skincare. From there, I morphed into owning my own day spa. At 24, I opened up a pretty large day spa, and we did well for a while. And I found that my passion was really working in the room with my clients and really working on challenged skin and diverse skin. I've worked on so many different types of skin, thousands and thousands. And I found that I really had a talent for this. And I decided to not go to law school and decided to go fully into this industry. So it's a great love of mine. And through my process, I've written books, I've taught, I've worked for great manufacturers of skincare. And my life kind of changed when I got hired as a director of education for an association in the industry. And from there, I was exposed to really the legislative and compliance side of it. I knew it always existed because I had a license, but I didn't spend a lot of time determining what I could do within my license. I was working, I was in the room
Right.
8 to 10 hours. So from there, that opened up a whole nother avenue for me to see what is really happening in the industry, what our license really means, and also realizing that we have a huge gap in being able to be fully represented and have a seat at the table when decisions are being made about our industry. There's not a lot of estheticians that are in state legislatures at all. And there's not a ton, honestly, on our state boards. And from there, it really lit a passion for me to see what can I do to help create longevity for people coming up behind me in the industry. And so that's where Esthetics Council was born, was really the mission to get us a seat at the table, which is advocacy, but then also provide education that is not based on just a manufacturer or just a product, but actual standard-based education. And that's where my journey with my instructional design degree and creating curriculum. I just got done a couple of years ago working on the Pivot Point new aesthetic curriculum. It helped illuminate to me what kind of basic education that we needed. And then, of course, our ongoing education, but having it based on evidence, skin science, and then also fitting within our compliance kind of rules world. It can be pretty complicated, but my mission now is to make sure that every esthetician who is coming up understands what their industry is about and also understands how to protect it, because there are some things that are really causing some issues for us and our ability to grow.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I love what you've said about, really wanting to make sure that for the next generations of estheticians that are really coming up, and rising up, that you are getting them really prepared for the things that you have seen in your career to be these huge gaps that need to be filled, as well as just not having that advocacy, that seat at the table, to your point. So what would you say you've seen to be some of the biggest gaps within the current esthetician structure, within the current compliance structure? What do you see in education that's missing? What is it that you see currently that is needing resolution or needing new solutions, new innovation?
Well, I think one of the first places that we need to start is dealing with new technology that's coming into the marketplace. The merging of medical and beauty started back, in the 90s. And quite frankly, when we got the lasers, the laser hair removal came out, those were some of the worst devices I had ever used. And when I'd had my day spa, I had a doctor come in, and it was just horrible stuff. The devices have increased in safety and ease of use, but the legislative side of it and the scope side of it has not kept up with the fact that we're trained as licensed professionals with a certain level of safety. But the minute you hear something that says medical, all of a sudden we're kept out of that discussion. And that should not be that way. There are things and devices and modalities that we're using now that are really safe that have been excluded from scope of practice. So the current rules that omit a lot of these incoming devices and technology are very antiquated and are not reflecting what our current level of education is. And our education as a whole, we're still at a 600-hour level in a lot of places. And we know from actual work in the field that we do need a higher level of education. And I don't know that I'm, that fond of saying 1,200 hours and you're safe and everybody should have 1,200 hours. But we've used hours within our profession to kind of dictate, how people can get prepared for a license. I think our profession is growing to a certain point where we need to start to look bigger than that and know that the education that you're getting to get your license is just the entrance into the field, because skin science is changing all the time. We've got some great new studies that have come out. We've got great new modalities and devices. And not all of them can be considered medical. We're not treating a disease. We're not treating a specific process that requires a medical intervention.
Right.
We're talking about healthy skin and we're talking about beauty. And so there's room for us to expand, but we've got to do this in a way that is smart and protects our clients, number one. That's our care of duty, right? That's the number one thing that we need to be keeping in mind all the time is client safety. And I think there's room for us to work in a field that can be considered cosmetic medical, but not on a level that is going in and trying to compete directly with medical. Unfortunately, we've got people on the medical side that see how much money can be made in the beauty industry, and there is a crossover. So our level of standards need to be held quite high. But at the same time, we need to be able to push back on some of the scope grabs that have frankly been going on for the last real decade is where I've seen that. So trying to fill the gaps with a level of professionalism, better education, which is continuing education, right? And having continuing education that is at a certain standard and not just somebody who decides, I'm going to do a class to try to make some extra money. I mean, that's great. Go ahead and do that, but be very transparent about what your background is, right? So we need standards and we need professionalism and we need a seat at the table. So really determining the strategy to get there is going to require all of us working together instead of everyone kind of off in their own corners with their own idea of how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just from your experience in being involved in creating these curriculums for aesthetics educators and aesthetics education programs, your own experience kind of rising through the ranks and going through a program like that yourself, and seeing how that education has changed over the course of, say, the past 10 years, where do you still see gaps in aesthetics education? Where do you still see that estheticians are coming into the workforce not prepared, or potentially just needing a little bit of extra education, or maybe a lot of extra education in certain fields?
Yeah, it depends on the direction they're going. One of the biggest gaps obviously is business education. And that is kind of an alternative, or what you consider an elective, because not everybody wants to own their own business, right? Not entrepreneurship, from experience, even in my own current startup that I'm working in, it takes a special kind of mentality and personality to be self-employed. Not everybody it needs to be self-employed, and that's absolutely okay.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding what that takes and what the sacrifice is to be self-employed is an important part of education. At a basic level, we need to be able to give people the opportunity, but understand that, right? So that's not fully developed in our curriculum, so you're going to have to get that when you get out. The other part that's really missing that I have found is the core science that's needed around the skin. And I'm not just talking understanding, most people get into the beauty side of the industry and they don't want to sit and take, learn about cells and physics and light. Unfortunately, in aesthetics, you need to have a foundation, especially around structure and function of the skin. And the reason why is, not only is that going to inform what you're looking at in someone's skin for their own health and safety, but it also is going to help you critically think when somebody's presenting a modality or a product to you that has certain claims. We can't hide behind the company's claims as a protection, especially with a license. So think about it. If you're a doctor and you're doing a diagnosis on someone and you give them a certain pharma product because that's what you've been told it's going to fix, that doctor's still liable, right?
Right.
So with an esthetician and your license, even if your manufacturer is saying, oh, this is going to remove this and you're going to look 10 years younger, if you make claims around that and something happens, which is luckily kind of unlikely, but if something does happen, it's your license that's on the line, not the manufacturer's. And that's really common around devices, especially the new things that have come up. I mean, we had that Hyaluronic pen that hit the market several years ago, which anybody that understood skin science could take a look at that and go, this is going to be a big problem on multiple levels. So the core part of skin science, structure and function, and the safety around that is essential. Same with cosmetic chemistry. There's a lot of things I've seen on the internet lately where everybody's got different claims about this cosmetic ingredient and this is going to work this way. And a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. And when you really sit down and look at the chemistry around our products and what we're doing, you can really cut through a lot of that. My products that I choose for my clients are never informed by somebody who's posted on social media.
Right.
Like, social media is great to open up a discussion, but that's not going to inform my educational level because each and every individual is so completely different. And there are some ingredients that are not highly safe. I mean, hydroquinone is an example of that, right? So, and now hydroquinone, you can't even use at a 2% level over the counter. And a lot of people don't understand that or know that. We're also taking products that are meant to be cosmetic, which is superficial, right? And we're microneedling them in the skin. Technically, that's a biologic if you look at the FDA regulations. Also, that product has not been tested with penetration deeper into the epidermis. So these are things that I notice a lot of new estheticians, they're desperate to build their business. It's very hard to do, especially if you're an independent practitioner. And so they see other places doing things and think, okay, I've got to do that to compete. and it's not apples to apples. And, if you think about it, we've got what, 300 and something billion people in America, or is it a million? I'll have to look at the stats. But I can tell you from my own recent research, there's only about 18% of people in the US that actually see a pro. And I'm talking either dermatologist or esthetician. It's really the market for everyone. It's wide. Everybody can play, and not every person is going to be the right esthetician for every consumer.
Right.
So there's more than enough room if we have a very strong industry that helps people understand what we do. So to recap, I would say the missing pieces are business, skin science, and then understanding cosmetic chemistry. On the treatment side, I'm seeing a real lack of massage education. Like my hands
Interesting.
are my best tool. I can change how someone feels in one hour facial. And I've seen it happen time after time after time. And also my hands are my diagnosis or my diagnostic tool as well. So really understanding how touch has such a huge role in what we do. I'm finding that, especially with COVID, a lot of people that were graduating post-COVID is getting a little bit better, but during that time period, we have a whole generation of licensees that didn't get to touch skin a whole lot. And it's essential. It's a real essential thing. I'd have to say the one thing that's kind of coming to mind that's missing as well is self-care. So from an esthetician standpoint, having the right ergonomics, which I can attest to, I've already had wrist surgery done. Understanding how to set up a room where you can work efficiently, and you can be very exhausted after an 8-hour day of facial after facial and body treatment after body treatment. So it's essential to understand how your environment and your ergonomics will affect the longevity in your career. We don't talk about that a whole lot. We also don't talk about the chemical exposures we have. I will never touch someone's face without gloves on. And I've done that since the early 90s because I knew, everything I'm touching may be okay for the consumer one time, but I'm doing that all day long. So it's really important to me to make sure that I'm protected. And I don't think we talk enough about that either.
Yeah, those are such great insights. And I think our listeners will be really interested to hear from your perspective, just as someone who has been on so many different sides of that educational space. I have so many questions coming off of what we just talked about. So I'll try to kind of formulate them in an organized way. I definitely want to jump in on this sort of social media trend myth busting, because I do think it's something that's really important, especially for, as you mentioned, younger estheticians that are green in the space. Definitely social media is a platform where not only consumers, but also estheticians are getting some of their education information. What other than, hydrocodone, I know you just mentioned that, what other myths have you seen really heavily on social media or trends that you have just been like, no, please, not this one, this is just not correct based on the chemistry of it all?
There's so many. I hear, what was it, slugging? I don't even know if that's still a trend. Essentially, this is a petroleum-based product to create a shield and a shine on the skin. Natural, healthy skin has a little bit of a glow, but not a shine. Right. So, things like that, especially when you're occluding young skin, can open up the door to a lot of problems. And so, if you're putting so much on and you feel like you're so dry and you're in your 20s, you need to talk to a pro because we need to find out what's going on. More than likely, we're dealing with some things in your environment and internal that need to be addressed. But just, trying to put as much on your skin as possible is not going to fix skin. If you like the feeling, like I'm at 8,000 feet up here in the Colorado mountains. So today I'm so dry and so uncomfortable, and I will have to do an oil and a cream over the top. So it's not really talking about what that individual will need. I think one of the disappointing trends that I'm seeing right now is we have a lot of public discourse on social media around sunscreens and some brands that are better than others. And then I see even other people, my fellow professionals, actually attacking each other over whether or not their product works. Number one, our clients see that, and they see that we're not professional when we do that. Number two, you never go attack another brand, especially if you have your own brand, and have it look like you're actually a professional in the industry. Again, what is said out there in social media, I think, is a great way to open up discussion, but it should never be the whole of the education. So, understanding that social media is a way to open up a discussion. Social media really should be directed to pulling consumers in to your services. Also, know I deal with board administrators across the US that watch people's social media postings. And when you're posting things that are outside of scope or something that they're interested in trying to regulate, and you're not thinking about what you're doing, I can't even tell you how many times I've been confronted by things that have been posted on social media by our regulators. Really hard for me to fight, even though I know this modality should be within our scope. If I've got estheticians out there doing it wrong, working out of scope, putting the wrong information out, it comes back and it bites everybody, not just that individual. And I do know of citations that have been issued off of social media postings, especially during COVID. We have some states that are really aggressive at that.
Yeah, I think
So,
you raised so many good points here. I mean, from the consumer side of, this idea of some of these trends taking away the importance of bespoke recommendations, customized recommendations for individual skin type and skin health. And to your point, internal issues that might be going on that might be creating this, especially if we're talking about skin dryness, there could be some eczema involved or psoriasis or other issues that are internal that then need to be discussed with a professional and not necessarily a TikTok star, right? And I love what you've said about social media being used as a starting point, as a discussion point where we open up that information and we say, oh, this is interesting. This is kind of cool or different or innovative or new or a new take on something old. But then it is the responsibility to our rights and responsibilities is really the responsibility of the professional to take that information and go and do some more research and go and really go back to their clinical backed, evidence backed, science backed education and start to really research, is this something that I want to implement? Is this something that really makes sense to me? Is it something that I can stand behind? You also touch on something that I think is so important and has been a real thread through our conversation thus far, which is this idea of estheticians really banding together and not tearing each other down, particularly on social media. And I think that that is such an important piece for any beauty and wellness entrepreneur, be they estheticians, be they not, any professional in any industry. Tearing other people down, whether they be your competition or not, it is always going to look incredibly unprofessional, right? It's about lifting yourself up, lifting your brand up, and it's also about celebrating your competition, because if you're not the right fit for somebody, then their products might be the right fit for that person. And there's no shame in that. There's no guilt in that. It's just, the way that the industry works. You will be the right fit for some clients. You will not be the right fit for others. And, I think that that is where we get so divisive, and that's also where these things are able to happen, where there's not a unified voice that there needs to be in order to get that seat at the table. There needs to be that camaraderie in the industry, and there also needs to be, to your point, this mentorship element as well, where estheticians feel like they're able to get mentored by estheticians in the space, because unfortunately estheticians also have a really high attrition rate. So that was another question that I wanted to ask you about was, what is it that you really attribute this attrition rate to? We're seeing a really high rise in the unemployment rate as well, and earning potential decrease for estheticians in the space. What do you attribute that to, and what do you think that estheticians can do in order to really combat that within the industry?
Yeah, that is a real passion of mine because what I was making in 1994 versus what I see people are paying now is a decrease.
Mm.
Uh, it's a problem. It's a huge problem. And I can't say based on data exactly what's influencing it. I can only talk from my experience. I think number one, as an industry, we've not been united and we've not done a good job of educating the public about what our value is.
Mm-hmm.
We also have on the medical side, those that have come into cosmetic medicine that have trashed us on multiple times. I actually have a study that I should put out on the website that talks about how ineffective facials are. And this was done, I believe, about 8 years ago.
That's shocking.
Um, it is very shocking where they've gone directly, after us. So, number one, that tells me we're doing something right. If I've got medical practitioners on the other side saying that we're pretty much worthless, I can tell you the whole rise of the med spa world, there wouldn't be med spas without
Of
estheticians.
course.
A lot of my colleagues were deep into educating doctors and nurses on how to run a spa. So it's a very complex issue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've done any favors for ourselves in this industry either. Especially when we talk about the kind of divisiveness and attacking each other and things like that. When we look divided, it's easy for other entities to come in. It is a very lucrative business for a lot of people. And so when people see that, they can take that entrance into this field and do some really funky things with it. I also feel that the rise of these instant services like fillers and injections, which great, do it. I don't have a problem with it at all. I think it's a great addition to an anti-aging regime. I think people think that they can get things done instantly,
Mm-hmm.
and so they don't really necessarily think of what they need to do long term, which then also, for those on a limited budget, takes away that income from estheticians. Um, I recently did kind of a little exercise in seeing what kind of jobs were out there,
Mm-hmm.
just putting out some resumes and see what would come back. I'd have to say some of the employers that we have in the industry right now too are not fully playing by the rules either. And we have a problem with a certain level of hiring going on. So in some states like here in Colorado, I think our minimum wage is now 15 an hour.
Mm.
I've still got spas that are trying to pay 18 for an
Mm.
esthetician. Like that's not much above minimum wage, but yet what we produce, and this is always something I've had in mind when I've either hired people or I've worked in dermatology, which is a great love of mine. Um, I had to really justify my salary by how much I brought in. And so I think that when we go back to even the business education, that's a part that's missing as well. You need to be able to sell
Mm-hmm.
to your client with a certain level of services. And then also you need to be able to get them the correct home care and sell that as well. So I think it's a very complex issue. I don't know that it's going to be fixed. It's definitely my mission to do so, to try to get all of us organized to where we actually can start to make a better livable wage. But I think we've kind of lost the fight on the cosmetic medicine side. Like that's definitely taken a huge chunk out of the market,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not looked at as complementary anymore. Other than I do know plastic surgeons are most of the time incredible to work with. I've done so much surgery prep,
Mm-hmm.
post surgery care. I mean, that is very gratifying. So I think there are areas we still can excel, but we need
Yeah.
to take a look at what's
Definitely. I
happening.
think it is one of those things where there's so much overlap and so much opportunity for collaboration. You spoke to the point on injectables and fillers and, the idea that having longevity in your skin health and having healthy skin as we age gracefully is something that is so important and something that, you do require an esthetician's guide with because that really is their specialty is skin health. And I think that oftentimes this is almost a misconception amongst consumers even or professionals is that there's some sense of vanity, or, that it's an extraneous expense, but our skin is our largest organ of the body. It is where, when there is imbalances within the body, it's where those imbalances are shown. I mean, there are, Western medicine, Eastern medicine, all different types of medicine will show you that when you are dealing with skin issues, or when your skin is imbalanced or unhealthy in some way, that it's usually a reflection of an internal imbalance as well. And so that's where having this very kind of dedicated skin health practice is something that's so important for overall self-care. It's like, I use this metaphor all the time on this podcast, so the listeners might be a little bit sick of it, but it's really like it's having like a gym practice, but for your skin, right? It's like having a workout practice for your skin. You go and you consult with a personal trainer, or you go to the doctor, and then you really need to have somebody who you can consult with that's not social media about your skincare. I mean, it is something that is so bespoke to you, and that is something as a consumer as well that I think, your mission and what you're doing is so incredible, because, as a consumer, sometimes I think it can be hard to know who to trust, right? Which professionals to trust even. And I think a lot of that comes down to the education component as well, and just, finding an esthetician that you really click with. It's like finding, anyone else that's a service provider, that you want to find someone that you click with, that you trust in their skill set and their recommendations, that you get along with, that you feel is really a coach for you. So I think that that's another component as well to really highlight in what you've said, is the skin health, this longevity, not these quick fix, one-stop shop, and really taking a look too at these non-invasive devices and technologies that are on the market now that are incredibly safe. It's such a different ballgame from what it was 10, 15 years ago. And it's also so much more affordable and accessible to the masses. And I did want to ask you a question based on something that you said earlier, which is around evaluation of these non-invasive devices as an esthetician. So what process, or what kind of steps would you recommend for estheticians that are looking to potentially use and leverage some of these amazing, innovative, non-invasive technologies? What is that evaluation process that you would recommend to them?
Well, it's kind of a complicated process, but the first place you have to start is within your scope. So what's going on with your scope of practice in the state? Unfortunately, we have gray areas in a lot of different states throughout the U.S. It always boils down to marketing claims. So intended use marketing claims, what the classification with the FDA is in some states. It is my opinion, and a position with the Aesthetics Council that I promote actively, is that estheticians should be able to use a Class 2 device, especially with the correct training. An example of Class 2 devices is a paraffin hand dip. It's registered as a Class 2 device. LED light, which we know is one of the safest modalities in our armament, should also be within our scope. I think starting at a basic level of having an idea of what you can and can't do, and then working with the manufacturer, making sure that the claims that they're putting out on their websites to the consumer or industry do not sound like medical claims in a way that can cause you to get a practice of medicine citation. I know of several practice of medicine citations going on in California right now that we're desperately trying to get cleaned up and fix. And it revolves around, cryotherapy, which cryotherapy is a modality. It's the use of cold. We've been using it for decades, even before there was estheticians back in, ancient times. We're using hot, right? So the misunderstanding with the boards is a big deal. So if you find out something's out of scope, that kind of closes the door on you. The next thing, again, manufacturer, finding out what their intended use is, how are they marketing it. Number 3, what's the safety guidelines? Not only the guidelines, I'd love to see some safety testing. I mean, our industry is really inadequate when it comes to safety testing. And I've got to say, even on the medical side, it's the same thing. So a lot of these devices are put together based on what you call predicate device with the FDA. and it goes under a predicate device, and they don't need the same level of testing if the first device was tested. It's really complicated, but you want to see that they have some sort of standard that's showing that if you do this way, it's going to be safe to your client. And then you're also kind of looking at price. What's your return on investment? A huge thing you need to understand. And also, what's your market? Mm-hmm. So you've got so many different factors you're looking at, but let's say you're in a market where the average facial is $80, which I don't even know if that exists anymore. But
I was going to say probably not.
That may be a clientele that can't spend $250 on a treatment that you need in order to make your ROI for that particular device. So you need to understand that side of it. And then looking at the device manufacturer, are they registered with the FDA? Anything that touches structure and function of the skin needs to be registered with the FDA, mm-hmm. unless the claim is just cleansing and beautifying. Mm-hmm. I have not seen one device out there in our industry that just claims cleansing and beautifying. So there are some, guidelines there. And then what's your support? Mm-hmm. Do you have a warranty? You must have training. If you buy a device from a company, they've got to be able to provide you safety training, which rolls over and deals with your liability insurance as well. So the very last thing I would say is make sure that you have liability insurance that will cover the use of that device within safety parameters, and make sure it's in writing. You want to see a writer for that specific device, or you want it listed specifically in your policy. Because again, we're working on the public. Each person is completely unique and different, and things can happen. Yeah. And so you need to be able, as a licensee, you want to protect that license, but you also want to protect your client as well. So it can be pretty complicated.
Yeah, no. And I think that's why, the work that you do with Esthetics Council is just so important. I haven't seen any other companies really doing this work. So can you tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing, what you're currently prioritizing, and how our listeners can, get involved, have a closer look, become members? Would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, this is a passion for me. We are not a for-profit company, so it's not like we're selling a product or something like insurance or something like that. My mission is to really get us a scope of practice that is standard throughout the U.S. It's a big ask, and I don't know that it will happen in my lifetime. But I would like us to see a scope of practice that is very clear, that respects our level of education and allows us to grow with technology. That's very important. In some cases, it looks like a second tier license because cosmetologists also have the same scope as us in most states. We know that there's not adequate training in a cosmetology program to allow you to do some of these advanced modalities without continuing education. So an answer may be that second tier license that allows you to go through another pathway. The other thing that I really am focused on is getting us a seat at the table. There's a lot of people making decisions about what I can do in my treatment room that have no idea about what I do. The other thing that we are offering with the Esthetics Council support. And so often with our members, if they get a citation, I will be contacted usually and asked about what they need to do. It's also about educating them about their rights and responsibilities. You have rights, especially when you're dealing with an agency like a board or an inspector. And so those rights, I've noticed in some cases, can be trampled on if you don't understand what you're dealing with. So usually when it comes to a citation help that we'll do for a member, it's not about disinfection, because usually you're going to lose a disinfection citation. Right. Might as well just pay it, figure out what went wrong, and move from there. But when it comes to things like practice of medicine on a modality that clearly should be within scope, those are some things that we really try to help with. I have legal counsel that actually will help take a look at things. We can guide you on how that works. The next thing that we're really focusing on is watching the legislative sessions. So right now, this is like Christmas for me because Christmas in retail, as you know, is insane, right? Legislative season is insane. I mean, I'm constantly tracking bills. We've got a bill in Illinois right now that's talking about a certified medical esthetician. It's a great first start, but we have a lot of things missing with it. So I take volunteer time and then go and try to coordinate with people on the ground to get the right legislation in place, work with the legislator, all of that. That can be a bit time consuming. So that's where my volunteers come in as well. I have some, great people that have volunteered their time to help with this. How you can get involved is, really by supporting us. We have membership levels, and that really helps fund a lot of the things that we do. You're volunteering your time as well. I'm working on putting together an advocacy crew that'll be trained on exactly what we need to look for. We also offer education. I work very closely with Terry Wojak with Aesthetics Exposed, which is some of the best classes out there. And so we have an online learning system that our members can access as well. So we're really trying multiple fronts to try to get everything that we can together to help the esthetician navigate what this compliance world looks like, because it can be very confusing for sure. And then you were talking about mentorship. I wouldn't be where I am without mentors. And one of the things that we really are kicking around that we'd love to get feedback from estheticians on is, are you open to mentorship? Do you want to learn from those of us that have been around for a while? I get mixed reviews on that. I see a lot of estheticians that think, oh, I've got it. I'll just master social media and know it all. I'm good. Okay, that's great, but there may be those that want that help as well. So we're involved with other organizations to try to promote scholarships to help. One of the things that we've been asked to be involved with is United by Beauty, which is a great organization. By being able to have a seat at the table and bring our concerns to the table, that will do nothing but just help our membership even grow stronger, and estheticians that really want to grow from there. So yeah, I am open to working with everyone as long as, they're professional, they're respectful, and they really have a passion for the industry for sure.
I love that. And I love this building of this amazing community, because also when we build community, we build this incredible momentum, especially if we have this mission in mind of being these professionals that are in it together, right? Especially when you think about what you're doing, which you really are very much going to bat for the underdogs in this situation. Really when you're going up into these rooms where you don't have a seat at the table, where we're trying to get a seat at the table for estheticians, you really are going to bat for the underdog in those situations who doesn't have that voice. And so I think that the work that Esthetics Council is doing is so incredible. It's so impactful for so many people. And I do want to just touch on something that you said a little bit earlier, where you said that a lot of estheticians just don't necessarily know their rights. And I think that that goes back to the education piece. And I think that for a lot of estheticians, for estheticians I've spoken to personally who have received citations, it can be a really scary thing, because they just automatically say, oh my God, I, did something horribly wrong, or I have to pay this thing, or I can't, go back with an argument, where, it's really important for them to understand their rights. And in some of these cases, they haven't even received anything in writing. They haven't even received a formal citation, and someone has come in and told them, kind of cease and desist. And so that understanding and that guidance from someone like Esthetics Council, from someone like you, from, someone like the volunteers within your brand, that can really help some of these estheticians who are panicked, and understandably so. I mean, when the state board comes knocking, it can be really scary, especially if you just don't have a full understanding. And there's also no guilt with not having a full understanding, given that, to your point, these things are changing all the time. The state boards regulations, FDA regulations, they change constantly. And so as an esthetician, having a resource to really stay up to date and stay current on what their rights are, on what their scope of practice is, on if there are new requirements for their licensure. It's so important for them to just feel confident and be able to say, hey, actually, you know what, my rights are being violated in this situation. Or, okay, got it. Yeah, just to your point, disinfection, yes, completely. I hold my hands up and I will pay that citation fee. But yeah, it is really, it's an interesting thing. And I think that it's really empowering knowledge is power. So, the more that they know about their rights, the more power and confidence that they will have to be able to fight for their rights, within their scope of practice.
Yeah, we all, this is one of the miracles of our democracy, right? We have individual rights, and even within your licensure, you have rights.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, built into most law, an inspector can come into your facility and inspect. You need to comply with that. That is just part of our licensure. There is a specific process for a citation, and just having an inspector walk in and say, you shouldn't be doing that without anything in writing is not correct.
Mm-hmm.
That is a violation of your rights. Now, if the inspector comes in and writes a citation, which is usually either a warning or, let's say, a state like California, you'll get a written documentation like a ticket,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still one more process. So understanding that that documentation you were just given is not actually a citation until you get something in the mail from the board is a really important thing to understand, because immediately you're panicking. And I've had lots of phone calls. Oh my gosh, I just got this. I just got this. And then there's no follow up from the board, which means you were warned, but it is a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to be able to understand what your state's process is and what you can fight. And honestly, every citation you have, if you want to fight it, you have the legal right to fight that citation. That's just the reality. With disinfection, that's why I say generally just pay the fee, because maybe it's been something that you've missed that you need to research. If it's egregious and you have followed all the procedures, fight that, because there's something that that inspector misunderstood or didn't pay attention to, or who knows. But you need to know what your rights are. When I'm dealing with sitting at the table and responsibilities that often get thrown at us that we need to do, one of the things that comes up a lot is the fact that people are doing things that can cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
It's always about harm. And so if you're very confident that what you're doing is not causing harm, that needs to be brought to the attention of your board, because there's a lot of misconception. There's a lot of, again, social media stuff out there that looks like harm is being done. So it's just a matter of having a voice and using it. And if you're doing any advocacy at all, you need to make sure you're registered to vote. It doesn't matter where you vote, and I'm not even going to get into the political side of it. But the bottom line is you need to be a registered voter to be taken seriously by some of these people who also are making decisions. So it's about being a true professional, honestly. And if you don't understand what the word professional means, or how you should be conducting yourself, reach out to me. I'll be happy to show you our code of conduct. You see code of ethics for a lot of things. There's some great code of ethics out there for estheticians through different certifications that are out there. Ours is a little bit different. It's a code of conduct. And this informs exactly how we should interact with our client, with each other, as well as with our regulators. And if we can all agree on that and update it as we need to, it's a living document, this can give us a guideline that can really raise us up to another level, which is where we need to be if we want longevity in this field. Because you said it earlier, we have a 50% attrition rate at least. We've got lower income. People are struggling. There's a reason why our industry is struggling.
Yeah.
And we as a group need to face it and fix what we can and move forward. Or, maybe this profession won't be here in 10 years. I don't know. Not my goal. I
Yes.
want to guard against that,
No worries.
but
That's clear. That is clear. No, and I think, the kind of silver lining to it all is that, to your point, the demand for estheticians, it's there. The demand is there. And so it's really about this merging of bringing everyone together. And I love this idea of this shared code of conduct. You see the code of ethics, of course, but this code of conduct, how we behave ourselves, how we present ourselves to not only state boards and regulatory bodies, but also within our professional lives, to our peers, to our clients. It's something so important that everyone is holding themselves up to that very high standard, because if the bar raises higher as far as our quality and what we really demand from this profession, that is going to be seen, recognized, and then trusted by the people that we are going to, to speak to present to say, hey, listen, we are real licensed professionals. We need to have a seat at this table. We deserve to have a seat at this table. We have a right to have a seat at this table. And our voice matters because we are educated, we are professional, and we have the knowledge that is needed to best serve these clients in a safe way. And that's something that you've spoken to throughout this episode that I think is so important to keep going back to, is that when we're doing this work to try to expand scope of practice in states where it's really something that's so necessary, where there are states that are just so restrictive for estheticians. For example, you and I chatted about this a little bit. I was shocked when I was in California a few years ago and I went to go get a brow tint, and I wasn't able to get a brow tint in Los Angeles. And I thought, wow, this is wild. But it is something that is outside of scope of practice for estheticians in that state. And so, I think that it is just something where, when we're going up to bat with these regulators and really, it's coming from such a good place. It's not coming from a place of wanting to get one over on anyone, or, a place of not really being, the appropriately licensed professional. It's more so just advocating for, no, we know that we are licensed, that we can apply this safely and effectively, and that our clients really want these services, and it's going to add to my earning potential. You mentioned LED. That was a shocker to me. I didn't know that LED was out of scope of practice for some estheticians. So, that is something that I just see as a fundamental basic, right, when it comes to aesthetics in this day and age in 2024. Are there any other, modalities or treatment types that you see as being outside of scope of practice for estheticians that you really are thinking, is kind of part of that fundamental scope?
yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I mean, in my mind, microneedling is one of those modalities that, especially not using heat, that when you're trained correctly, it should be part of our scope of practice. It just should. And, we're talking about California is a perfect example. We were talking about the brow and the lash tinting. There was an effort made to add that into the scope when we went through what we call a sunset review. I applaud the effort, but it fell short because it didn't take care of the administrative side of California law that talks about anything that's used on the body needs to be FDA approved. So then, that effort should have included those of us that understand the legalities around words. Words really matter. And then we also should have included the manufacturers in this process. So manufacturers don't get a pass when we're trying to solidify our scope of practice, because obviously that's how they make money too. So when we come to LED, I've been lucky enough to work with some very good LED manufacturers that are very committed to helping, keep our industry strong and safe. But again, we still have probably 10, 15 states where LEDs considered out of scope. Alaska just put in something about dermal lights, which is, I don't even know what they're talking about. So words matter, and watching this kind of stuff is super important, and you have to know what you're looking for. But California, yeah, technically you can dye now, but show me an FDA approved dye. Doesn't exist except for one that's using some sort of a silver nitrate that isn't really the same thing. So um, those are the types of things that I look at that are very difficult for me to put into tiny sound bites to let people know what's going on, because it is so complicated. I have to look at any bill around cosmetology.
Mm-hmm.
Then I've got to look at the rules of cosmetology. Then I have to look at the medical bills and then the medical rules,
Right.
because that right there, I mean, we had a state, I want to say Connecticut, but that might be the wrong state. It's been a while now, where an esthetician bill was being put forward, which is great. But already on the medical side, we had prohibitions that encompassed microdermabrasion, chemical peels. So this was a statute that was already put into place through the medical side, which then would limit whatever you could do on the esthetician side. So it's things like that that can be very complicated, and that's why the council is there, so that, with the correct funding and the amount of people coming in and working together, we can start to get on top of that and then educate the member and the esthetician. They don't even have to be a member of ours to get this education, but it's really important that you understand how things are written and what that means, so that you also can have a seat at the table and reply appropriately. I've been in meetings with state boards where estheticians were really upset, and rightfully so, but it turned into such a situation where we looked hysterical. And I could see, every board meeting has a deputy attorney general that's assigned to the board. And the minute you lose the legal side of it, or they turn, kind of tune you out, we've lost the argument. So it goes back to learning how to be a professional with a certain code of conduct and be able to approach boards and try to get our message heard. We're a primarily female industry. We're very diverse. The part that I loved about this industry is everyone was welcome. I mean, I have worked on all kinds of people, and my love of people and feeling like I can make a difference in their life has been what's motivated me for a long time. And I don't want to see us lose that. There's not many industries where we have that. Beauty happens to be one of those that is ever changing, and it's cool, and you can learn different things. We just need to find a way to grow together so that we can protect and make sure that we have that industry in years to come.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful way to kind of bring it all together. Susanne, is there anything else that you want to share with us on the podcast for our listeners, our viewers, anything else on this topic before I ask you our fun last question that we ask to every podcast guest?
I can't think of anything other than, I'd love to have everyone be a member. I'd love to hear from people. I'm here to help. And so I want to see us succeed and be able to work together in a really meaningful way. Definitely.
Fantastic. And where can they find you in terms of website, social media? Obviously, we'll put this all in the caption as well, but where's the best place that people can go to become members of Esthetics Council?
That would be aestheticscouncil.org, and it's aesthetics with an E. So you can go to our website. You can message us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We also have a Facebook group. And then, we're working on our Instagram as well. So you see different postings there. I'll be speaking at a lot of the shows. So I'm going back into the show circuit. I'll be in New York on March 3rd. So I'll be happy to talk to you there. Also, we're going to have a booth in Las Vegas this year. And I think that's June 24th, if I remember that correctly.
That is amazing. That's so exciting and such a great... Yeah, such a great place to be, and such a great opportunity for our listeners. Hopefully, a lot of them will be going to that show. It's a big one in the industry. So yeah, really great that you guys will have a booth there. Again, I think your mission is so important. It's very much aligned with our mission at Artemis of empowering the unsung heroes of beauty and wellness. So, we are very much behind you and absolutely love everything that you are doing. So before I let you go, I do just want to ask you a question that we ask to all of our interviewees on Glow&Tell, which is, what does beauty mean to you personally?
Oh, that's a deep one. Beauty means to me being completely confident in your skin and knowing that you can face anything life throws at you because you're confident.
Great answer. I love it's so amazing because we have so many different guests on the podcast from so many different aspects of the industry and outside, and everyone has a different answer, but that is such a great one. Yeah, Susanne, it's been amazing speaking to you. Your passion shines through. I'm so excited to get the word out about Esthetics Council. I think the work that you're doing is so incredibly important, and hopefully it will light a little bit of a fire under some of our SDs to check out their education, check out their rights, make sure that they have their T's crossed, their I's dotted, and that they are just looking ahead towards the future, to your point. So thank you so much, Susanne, for joining the podcast today. This was fantastic recording with you. And everybody, please go check out Esthetics Council. We will have all of the information in the caption below. Thank you so much, Susanne, and we will see you all next time on Glow&Tell. Thank you for listening to Glow&Tell. Please like, subscribe, comment, and follow anywhere where you listen to podcasts. We'll see you next time.